Welcome back to Morgan's video blog with writing tips from the pros and, of course, my own writerly musings. Today, I'm here to share with you Finding the Authorial Voice, a DisConIII panel. In December of 2021, I had the opportunity to attend DisCon, and I'll be sharing my panel notes here on the channel. The panelists for the titular panel were many: Joe Walton, Usman T. Malik, Cass Morris, Mary Terzullo, J.T. Greathouse, Andrea Stewart, and Walter John Williams himself. The panel was moderated by Jose Pablo Irate. The panel description was as follows: story, characters, and plot are important, but what often defines a book is the feel of the prose. It can turn a merely adequate story into a raging success, or an excellent story into something barely tolerable. The voice as heard by the reader is critically important. So, what defines voice? From stylistic choices like dialect and punctuation to narrative voices like point of view, this panel will discuss how to find the authorial voice that best fits you. Now, the room itself where the panel was held was small and overcrowded, and the most uncomfortable COVID-wise space I was in all weekend long, although I was on the aisle and gave myself as much space as was possible. But the strong panelist and the panel topic made me decide to risk it. So let's start off with, what is authorial voice? Now, it's a nebulous thing to define, but the panelists did their best. According to Joe Walton and Cass Morris, it's a thread that is in all your work so people can identify you as the author no matter the subject. It's what makes you sound like you. From J.T. Greathouse, it's what unites all your work. And from Walter John Williams, it's what sells you to the reader, why you read a particular author. New voices on old stories can carry the story. And it it might also be a forcefulness of writer personality from Usman T. Malik. So let's talk about this tool set you can use to develop your voice. Now, there was some discussion about whether a voice is innate or taught, and can it be authentic if it is consci- consciously crafted rather than unconsciously? Points to ponder. So, step one, examine your rhetoric. Despite the word's connotations, this isn't necessarily political or violent. This is the structuring of your patterns in repetition, syntax, rhythm, and when you break your patterns, your styles of metaphor and your types of description. Are you long and winding, or sparse and precise, or sparse and vague? For characters like you, when writing characters that are not like you, try purposely breaking your patterns. To, de- to develop a rhetoric you like, try studying authors that you admire and try to observe what their patterns are. Tips from Cass Morris. Um, Another tool is to sample different voices. Write the same scene with different styles. Try bare bones and thick description and lots of internal monologue and action heavy. Play with it and see what resonates with you. Tip from J.T. Greathouse. Another tool is to separate the voice from the rhetoric. While rhetoric is a tool, it is not the voice itself, some claim. Some writers have drastically different styles between books, different types of metaphors, patterns, humor levels. A step behind those tools is where the writer lies, according to Jo Walton. She also said that Walter John Williams is the great ventriloquist because he writes with so many different tones and everything else, but as a whole, his works always feel, quote unquote, like a Walter. Another tool you can use is cast size and pacing. Often particular voices have a certain number of characters they track, a certain dynamic between characters and levels of meanness or niceness, an inherent pacing in their writing. Mary Terzullo. Another tool you can play with is sentence structure, playing with punctuation, disorder, chaos, and sentence fragments. In its extreme, Cormac McCarthy's novel, I think Child of God, was said to be the best book of poetry in '73, despite being prose, because of the stylistic choices. Another tool you can do is to read widely. There is a saying, you read 1,000 poets, you sound like 1,000 poets. You read 10,000 poets, you sound like yourself. Reading widely helps you absorb multiple voices, and you can either try out each of their voices to see what comes most naturally for you, or you can blend them until you sound like yourself. Another tool you can try is to literally type out books from authors you admire. Reportedly, Hunter Thompson did this with F. Scott Fitzgerald's books. It's worth a try. Another tool you can try is to write until you find yours. Some people naturally have a unique voice. Others need to write a million words to get there. Another thing you can try is to literally imitate authors. Read authors you admire whose voice works for your story during your writing process and just let that leak through. On the flip side, you can try a reading diet. Some writers need to avoid similar genres or all books when writing to avoid the voice from leaking into their writing. Some just get too into what they're reading to write until they finish the book. Some can only write while rereading books they already know or nonfiction, and some can read anything as long as they don't overlap with like historical characters or settings or what have you. And your final tool is to observe when something you're reading works. Take notes and see if you can analyze why and how it worked. How did it invoke this particular response in you? Now, many of the panelists were certain that style does not equal voice. Others thought that style was the tool of the voice. That's a little nebulous. So let's talk about how different voices are used. For Joe Walton, each book needs its own voice, but your authorial voice is still the puppet master in the background. If you deliberately parody someone, you understand it. But the parody must be done with love or it's just mean. Try parody as a writing exercise to teach yourself how the voice works. Walter John Williams matches his writing style to the project and is very conscientious of his language choice, modern verses, anachronisms, etc. But reality can be stranger than fiction. There were societies of merchants in the Middle Ages that basically cosplayed King Arthur's court for festivals for hundreds of years, not thousands, hundreds of years. Everything old is new again. Walter John Williams also says that he has a parliament in his head of novelists. The challenge when you write such separate works is it's hard to sell because they are all, quote unquote, a Walter John Williams book like no other, rather than most authors, where if they write one thing, you're likely to enjoy their other works because of the matching tone and voice and genre, etc. For example, he's currently writing both a contemporary modern voice with light description and heavy internal monologue, and a Jacobean light style fantasy. Each genre and subgenre has its usual voice, but it can be fun to mix and match. Roger Zelazny's Amber Stuff was so popular because it was partially, I mean, obviously the writing in the world and everything, but partially because first person close was new to fantasy. It had been written like Tolkien before then. Some have mixed cyberpunk and noir and written science fiction with that. As long as the pacing of the style works for the genre you apply it to, it can be fun. Otherwise, you just break the genre. And we all know if you break the genre, you get 1-star reviews and you don't find the right audience. But play with your voice, see what you can do. Ada Palmer's Terra Ignota series is in the 18th century didactic tone with a narrative voice, talks to the readers and was suggested as a master class in voice as the series goes on. The mystery genre was called out for having its formula set in the 1920s. It's been the same formula since then, and the authorial voice is literally the only reason fans read new ones. Your voice gets defined by how brave you're willing to be. Flip things around and don't give a hoot. Like China Mayville, according to Usman T. Malik, you can do anything with fiction, and if you're not, we're missing out. So, all in all, it was a lively panel with a lot of different approaches to both voice and style. What best aligns with your writing? And what authors do you admire? And which have voices that are similar to your writing? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching and tune in again next week for more writing tips and writerly musings. Bye bye.